Our season continues over Coruscant. Lord Malgus returned from yet another successful campaign. He was disenchanted to learn that Mandalore seemed to hold his own against Darth Zana. He at this point was accustomed to being back at the Sith HQ before anyone else, as he was the most successful individual when it came to campaigns. This wasn't a strategy thing for Malgus. More or less, he just threw everything he had as hard as he could. It often crippled the entire structure of any defense. Malgus by this point was the most successful Sith Lord in the Sith Empire, which for him led to some resentment for Exar Kun, though Malgus was simply buying his time. He did it before, and he would do it now. His entire mantra was allowing Exar to overthrow himself. Once that was done, he would take over. Of course, while Malgus was looking through his own strategy, another fleet returned from active combat. Malgus was looking at the crucial defense systems put in place by the Republic, and he had an acolyte who was helping him with this. Her name was Sola Grey, but he didn't care. She was just a grunt in his eyes, and that's all that mattered to him. She was showing him hollow maps of where assaults went well and where they struggled the most at. Malgus was simply looking this over because he wanted to be able to continue his campaigns without having to refuel his resources. He would often need several repairs and tons of new vessels simply based off of his attack patterns. While his attack could be seen as overwhelming, which most of the time it was, they cost a lot of warriors. The Sith warriors weren't that important to him, just like Sola. She was someone who would die for the greater good. That was the ascension of his power. If he could get what he wanted, then it didn't matter what happened to them. Malgus told her to go away after she pointed out a couple of things. He could be a bit of a brute, but this anger wasn't exactly directed at her for simply existing. Malgus was pissed because he had to deal with Exar Kun. He could only tolerate listening to his rambling for so long. He swore if he got up in his face, he would drop him, but not even Malgus wanted to deal with that at the moment. It wasn't worth his time. He sat on his throne on his bridge, and he was hailed by Exar. He requested that they meet on the surface of the planet. Malgus nodded in agreement, and told some deckhands to fetch his shuttle. He was pissy as it was, but now he was really annoyed. The whole point of coming to Coruscant was to gather supplies so he could go back out to the battlefront. Of course, Exar had to arrive here. The main issue Malgus was having on the front lines was the fact that the droid armies were so vast. It wasn't their strategy, it was their numbers. As Malgus noted, the tactical droids were having a really difficult time handling Sith assaults, with Vitiate and his children causing rampage on some fronts, brief skirmishes with the Republic, Exar's foolish behavior, Darth Treya's pets running rampant, Malak and Revan doing their thing, with the ever-elusive Darth Bane out and about. It made sense why they couldn't pinpoint a counter strategy that worked. Malgus walked to his vessel and boarded the ship. There she was again. Why was she always around? It was getting annoying at this point. Sola was technically his second in command, because at this point Malgus didn't have an apprentice running around. She wasn't really much of a commander either. Her role was relegated to cannon fodder. The fact that she survived this long was nothing short of a miracle for her. With the way Malgus sacrificed acolytes and marauders, it was a surprise he had any left to his command. His vessel cruised down to the city skyline of Coruscant, or what was left of it. There was really a deadly haze that filled the fiery skies of Coruscant. There hadn't been light on the planet since the fall of the Republic. When his ship landed, he exited. Sola was following behind him like a shadow. He stopped where he landed. The Sith had a makeshift command center at the top of the steps of the Jedi Temple. It was set up by Exar after Revan and Bane left the area. He felt that if he set it up, he could use it to rupture the alliance that seemingly formed between the two of them. It didn't work, but whatever made Exar feel better at this point. That was the common mantra between the Sith and their understanding of this makeshift ruler of theirs. It was only a matter of time until he fell. Revan knew that when he lost to him too. Regardless, Malgus watched the fiery skies engulf the planet. He turned to Sola and told her to fetch some reports on the conflict of this planet. He wanted updates. He could still hear a distant battle going off, explosions and blaster fire. The smell of death filled his lungs and empowered his darkness. Malgus walked over to the command table to find Exar standing there. He told Malgus that he was excited about their opportunities to work together. Malgus looked at Exar without saying a word as Exar opened up a holomap of the known galaxy. He pointed towards 3 planets and said that they needed to be taken. Malgus responded under a grit in his voice. He didn't want to be here, but he was doing it so that the Sith could win. Exar said that the Jedi were seemingly trying to get to the Axis of 3. If they could cut off the Republic from those reinforcements, then it would completely throw out their effort in the war. Malgus told Exar that their fleets were impenetrable. They couldn't get through to them. While Malgus was the most successful Sith out of the Empire, he didn't want to risk going against the Axis. What happened whenever a Sith fleet attacked was never worth it. When the Sith showed up, they would begin the battle, and then they would be caught in a situation they couldn't escape from. It happened to Vitiate's son, and Vitiate wasn't very happy about it. He even expressed that he refused to dedicate his troops to that sector of the galaxy because it was clearly not worth the time. While there was a point that Vitiate had, Exar didn't care. To Vitiate, he believed that the Jedi would break into the Axis of Three. Once they did, the three planets would collectively weaken themselves for the Republic War effort. Once that happened, they could pounce and rip apart the three infrastructure worlds. Malgus begrudgingly asked Exar which Jedi tried to get to the Axis of Three. He smiled and pulled up a hologram that depicted Skywalker facing down Nihilus. Exar told Malgus that it was just a child. The boy wasn't a real threat, and he proved that with his faulty maneuvers. While Malastare was a loss and so was Mandalore, they were out-of-the-way worlds. If they could get to the Axis of Three, then they could win this war quickly. Malgus didn't see it at all. He knew that the foundry planets of both their adversaries were to the south. While the Axis of Three had a lot of supplies, they were useless because they were just building up vessels that had no one that could fill them. Geonosis and Kamino should be their main targets. But tension began to rise between the two Sith Lords as Exar realized that Malgus was attempting to challenge him. Before it could escalate any further, Sola came running up and gently placed the chip into Malgus' hand before scurrying away from the near conflict. It was enough to break the tension as Malgus plugged the drive in and looked at the reports from the Battle of Coruscant. He scoffed. He asked Exar if that was enough. Seriously? Only 1 billion people were killed on Coruscant. That was hardly anything. According to the debates, there were 3 trillion sentients who lived on the planet. Exar told Malgus that it was because the people barricaded themselves in the lower levels of the city. Most of those casualties were topside residents. All of them were upper-class individuals who had a lot of money and no grit. When they were targeted first, it gave the rest of the people of the city ample time to prepare anything that came their way. Sure, they were just civilians and people with weapons, but turns out when you have nearly 3 trillion of them actively fighting against you, you can't do anything. Coruscant was like a fortress. It could probably hold out for the longer part of a decade if it needed to. The people down there could grow their own food, and they had their own water supply from what was under the city and the planet. Malgus was so furious. Exar was such an ineffective leader, and he almost had enough of it before his train of thought was cut off. Exar told Malgus that he was being assigned to attack the Axis of Three. Malgus gritted his teeth and asked why. Exar completely ignored the question and told him that he was being directed towards the southern planet of the Axis of Three. Malgus said Biss in a questioning voice, to which Exar nodded his head. He told Malgus that Biss, according to reports, was the least defended location in the Axis. Truthfully, Exar was lying. Biss was well defended. Not the best defended, but like the middlemost defended. Kuat was the best defended, and Corellia was the least defended. However, Corellia sat in the middle of both Kuat and Biss. The only thing Biss was the closest to was Thyfera. Malgus asked if he was going to attack the planet alone, and Exar confirmed that he was. Nihilus was being rerouted towards the unknown regions because it seemed as if there was a trail that Revan was on. Maybe. Exar wasn't positive. For a leader, he didn't radiate confidence, but that was because he actively was looking over his shoulder rather than focusing on the war at hand. Malgus stormed off when he was finished and left Coruscant for his flagship. Upon his arrival, he'd have about 30 minutes on his bridge until Sola informed him that their preparations had been completed. They were ready to go whenever he was ready. Malgus dismissed her and told the fleet to prepare for the jump to hyperspace. They were heading to Thyfera. Malgus then realized something. He realized that he had no clue who this Sola was. He got up from his throne once they were in hyperspace. He would kill her. She had to be a spy of sorts. Malgus realized that he couldn't find her. Where had she gone? Turns out she went back to the bridge and missed him. When he eventually returned to the bridge after searching for her throughout the ship, he ignited his weapon and demanded to know who she was. Sola was very confused, but she saw the threat coming her way and asked what he was doing. He prepared to swing, and so she ignited her lightsaber and put the blade up to her face. It was crimson, which confused him. He swung down and she was thrown backwards, staggering. He demanded to know how she got that lightsaber. She was confused, but defended herself again as he pushed her back against the window of the bridge and looked into her eyes with a soulless expression, demanding to know why she was here. He blasted her again as she fell off of her feet and her lightsaber dropped to the ground. She looked up and put her hands over her head, telling him that she served with him on Raxus. He stopped. That was one of their first victories after Coruscant. He stopped but kicked her lightsaber backwards. He lowered the blade to her throat and demanded that she choose her words wisely. Sola told him that after the Battle of Raxus, his formerly second-in-command died in the medical wing. She was the next in line. Malgus paused for a moment. He looked up and his anger dissipated from his face. His lightsaber extinguished. He realized that's why the dude wasn't around anymore. He told her to next time make him aware. The worst part is she did. He just wasn't paying attention. She said it was when they returned from Raxus. He either heard it but didn't retain it or just didn't hear it. Either way, the little mix-up was over. She got herself back up and put her lightsaber on her belt and made her way away from the bridge. Malgus didn't understand that. Kind of annoying, but whatever. She'd probably die on Biss anyways, so it didn't really matter. When the Sith fleet arrived at Thyfera, Malgus noticed the lonesome vessel floating above the planet. Nihilus hailed Malgus and told him that he was set for his invasion of Biss. According to recent fleet activity, the Biss fleet should be considerably smaller. The fleets in the Axis were responding to activity on Keda Nemodia, which was still Separatist territory. For whatever reason, the Republic anticipated an attack. Due to them being cut off from the rest of the galaxy, that was to be expected consistently. Though the response was likely generated from the Republic assuming the Separatists got clobbered by the Sith Empire, which wasn't true. Nihilus told Malgus that he would enjoy the pleasure of killing a Jedi if he came across one. Nihilus was jittery with the thrill of the hunt. To nearly kill 4 Jedi was enthralling for him. He just wished he could have finished the job. Perhaps he would next time. Malgus didn't care. At the moment, conquest was his main priority. The Jedi would come and go as they pleased. He would kill whoever wanted to challenge him. It wasn't that difficult. With the fleet rerouted, they jumped towards Biss. For Malgus, the anticipation began to mount. He loved it. To rip through defenses and then burn civilization to the ground was something he enjoyed with all of his heart. He loved the smell of burning cities. He loved hearing the cries of civilians as they were mass executed. Malgus called together the individuals who would be integral to different pieces of this assault on Biss. Firstly, he was planning on using a strategy he liked to call the Blitz. It was really simple. Of course, he didn't have much information on the defense at Biss, but he had a hunch of what they had. Chances are they'd be outfitted with the Venator-class Star Destroyer, as a ship of the line with several other frigates and light cruisers. Chances all the Acclimators would be held in reserve because they didn't take hits too well. They were great support ships and drop ships, but their shields were atrocious. Malgus decided that the best decision would be to push the fleet down the middle of the Republic fleet and then back-end them. He did it at Raxus, which worked really well against a poorly defended Separatist fleet, though that had a lot to do with ship design, which is something Malgus didn't prepare for. The bulk frigates the Separatists used had cannons all around, unlike the Venator, so when he broke through their lines, they could still fire on him. Plus, the Separatists had Lucrehulks at the ready during that battle. With the Republic fleet, the Venators would be the ship at the back of their lines. If he could drive through them, he would catch them off guard. The main thing Malgus noticed was the autonomy of their flagships. The triangular design, which was strikingly similar to their own flagships, had a great output towards the front of the vessel. However, everything from the edge of that triangle backwards was undefended. This is where Malgus got Sona, or whatever her name was. He told her that she'd be the lead of the ground assault. Once they broke through the lines, the support ships, which were in the middle of the Sith fleet, would break off. This would allow her to lead an invasion on the ground. He had one simple instruction for her: destroy their troopers and find anything that related to the Starforge. She understood and abandoned the bridge. Malgus waited on the bridge. His deckhands prepared him. They told him that they would be dropping out of hyperspace in 10 seconds. Malgus' heart pounded. He rose from his chair like a man possessed. 7 seconds. He walked towards the front of his bridge. 4 seconds. 3, 2, 1. The fleet exited from hyperspace. The interior rocked a little, and then he looked at the Republic fleet. They were currently doing fleet exercises, which meant they weren't at their best defensive position. However, this did mean that they were essentially in an offensive position. Malgus had to order all their shields up. Being that they were in hyperspace, their shields weren't up, and all their power needed to be redirected. The Republic quickly pounced on the Sith, and one of their capital ships was bombarded. Malgus ordered forward an experimental vessel. He commissioned this without anyone's knowledge. The fleet broke out into explosions, and shields went up really quickly, and as they did, Malgus realized his right flank was heavily damaged by the exit from hyperspace. He ordered all fighters out of their bays immediately. The Republic was sending its V-19s in for combat. They needed to be destroyed. The Sith quickly countered, but they were in a bad position. Malgus called to his deckhands, demanding to know where the experimental ship was. They told him that it was damaged, but it was able to get the shields up before it exploded. Malgus took a deep breath. That was close. He ordered the fleet to begin a counterattack. His orders rang out through the comms as he told them to initiate the blitz maneuvers. Fighters from both fleets engaged with each other, blasting away and ripping apart at each other. The Sith fleet hit its thrusters forward and lifted its frontal shields to maximum power. The return fire wasn't all that impressive, but it would suffice. The experimental ship Malgus brought forward kicked on its engines and was directed towards the fleet. There was a tactical droid inside of it. He stole it from Raxus. Actually, everything about the ship was stolen from Raxus. It was a super yacht that a wealthy investor on the planet owned. Well, he owned it until he was gutted by Malgus. The Sith Lord believed that it would make a useful tool, so he filled it up with explosives, ripped the shield generators of a couple separatist flagships apart, and put them inside of it and rigged it to detonate. It was a miracle it even survived going through hyperspace. A lot of the ship was just a mess. There wasn't even a life support system inside of it. But Malgus was using it for the purpose of bombing his enemies with it. Oh yeah, and he also attached as many engines to the back of it as he could. It was a Frankenstein of a vessel. The Republic turned its attention towards the ship. It was already smoking from the initial barrage, but the tactical droid, who was completely convinced he was fighting for the Separatists, piloted it towards the center of the Republic fleet. The Republic stopped focusing on the Sith fleet, which was casually closing distance after its surprise entrance. Once the Republic locked onto the yacht, it was already too late. The vessel sped towards the middle of their lines and its shields were deactivated. The ship full of Rhydonium imploded, which was very anticlimactic to Malgus, before it exploded. The explosion sent out debris that ricocheted off of every available ship in the area. The Republic was caught in a bind. The explosion rocked their ships, some of which were destroyed in the process. Malgus pressed forward. They would destroy them now. The Blitz was activated. The wings of fighters went in towards the middle. Behind them were the capital and support ships. The whole crater was large enough for 2 fleets to fit through, let alone 1. As they slid through, the bombers were released and slammed down on the Republic vessels from the middle outwards. The Republic Navy was at a loss. The fleet admiral was killed in the explosion, and they were left defenseless. At the moment, the clearing was sort of open. A wing of 4 acclimators were coming around the shipyard to defend. They were preparing to engage with the Sith. Malgus told Sola to begin her ground invasion. He knew that they would lose a couple of dropships in the process, but it didn't matter to him. The long-range cannons on the capital ships opened fire at the acclimators, and they were caught off guard. At the same time, the rest of the fleet moved behind the engine bays on the Venators and the support vessels. It was total chaos, and the Blitz seemingly worked as they rounded behind the Republic fleet. Malgus made sure everyone knew they could not target the shipyards. The Sith Empire could use them for their own fleet and their own construction. Sola, on the other hand, led the dropships away from the fleet as they descended towards the planet. The capital city of Biss was heavily defended. Not only were there anti-air cannons, but there was a shield generator that covered everything except for the exterior walls. It was a work in progress and they no longer had time to work on it. The heavy fire from the ground cut through the dropships until they found a bundle of trees to land in. The dropships had to open fire on the ground so they could make a safe landing procedure. When the troops exited, they made it clear to the fleet that their heavy weaponry wouldn't be safe to drop yet. Malgus was furious, but he gave them a simple order: figure it out before he got there. If he landed and they weren't able to take the shields down, they would all be killed by his hand. That was as clear as it needed to be. Sola lined up the Acolytes and Marauders. Malgus had probably the largest group of Sith troopers who could use the Force. It was a great aid to his ability to succeed. The Sith troopers lined up and began running forward. In front of them were the lightsaber-wielding maniacs, and at the front of their line was the warrior Sola Grey. She did hope for the opportunity to become Malgus' apprentice. It was a prized role and she believed that if she could earn it, she could finally be respected as the best Sith Lord student. When they left the tree line, they were fired upon. The capital city was a fortress and it was designed to be that. Because if the Sith broke in, they needed their defenses ready. The speed of the Acolytes and Marauders separated them from the rest of the Sith troopers who fell behind due to the lack of ability to use the Force. They were also providing covering fire, which as it turns out, wasn't very helpful for them because once the turbo lasers turned their attention towards them, they were blown to pieces. The Sith troopers weren't the issue, though on the bright side, they were smaller and harder to hit, so once they began breaking out of group formations, they were able to press further. The Sith, on the other hand, were launching themselves up the walls and attacking the turbo lasers. At the same time, Sola and a group of her best Marauders broke off to the side and snuck through the shield itself. Once they were through, their trouble began. Clone troopers and Republic militiamen were ready for the counter. The counter was horrendous, and once they breached, they were cut down. It wasn't a large number of clones or militiamen, it was just a group who happened to be stationed here, though an ATTE saw them and blasted at them. Sola saw it and used the Force to propel the blast into the side of a skyscraper. The building was extremely lean, so it knocked the building off the stability, and it began to tilt. Sola pointed at it, and her Marauders used the Force against the building before they all leapt up and began their ascent. Clones and troopers began rounding the corners as they climbed up the falling structure. While they were climbing, one of the Marauders found the shield generator and directed the group there. On the outside of the base, the Sith troopers were being slaughtered. ATTEs and ATRTs were beginning to press outside the shields, which was a terrible idea. As they broke out, the Sith Acolytes who were on the outside pounced. They'd been using the walls as cover and launched themselves at the counter-assault once they were out of the shields. The clones were caught off guard and they were quickly slaughtered for their ineptitude. Inside the shield, Sola's group left off the falling structure as it slammed onto a couple heavy cannons that were stationed for mortar fire. Obviously, they didn't last too long. There were a couple of other groups, but that didn't matter at the moment. The Sith charged the shield generator and began cutting through it, which within moments led to the collapse of their shields. Sola called out for reinforcements and they were deployed with a wing of bombers and fighters. Malgus was kept on his bridge watching over the chaos as it ensued across the battlefront in space. The Republic was beginning to retreat, but he didn't plan on allowing that to happen. There was one flagship that was preparing to escape. Malgus told his deckhands to target the engines. He wanted to board the ship. As it turns out, the hunter could sense Jedi on board the ship, and he wanted to chase the hunt. He was a butcher, and he wanted to slaughter. While his shuttle prepared to deploy to the disabled Jedi cruiser, the ground battle was going extremely well. With the shield generator down, the heavy turbo lasers deactivated. As it turns out, the turbo lasers were connected to the generator system itself, so when the generator was destroyed, it shut them down. For the Sith, that was terrific. Their fighters and bombers had clear control over the skies with little flak resistance. The reason this was for the heavy tanks that landed on the ground and began their counter-assault of the Republic counter. The ATTEs were superior tanks, but with Sith on the ground, and the advantage rapidly slipping away from their grip, they were swarmed and destroyed. The capital city was beginning to get engulfed in flames. Within the city, the people became seen as cannon fodder, and this was done by their own heroism. Not that they would have survived anyways, but some of their militiamen were wearing citizens' outfits, so they started firing back. All the citizens became targets. Sola, on the other hand, led her marauders on their continued push against the Republic. Though something caught her attention. It was a child in a swarm of people running away. He was next to his dead family, who had surely been killed by the conflict. She watched as a building toppled over next to the child. There were citizens running around, the kid like a rock in a river, but it was no use. The crashing wood of the building falling down on the kid jolted her a little. She just didn't expect to see it. She snapped out of it and continued ordering the conquest of the planet. At the same time, she began a personal investigation for any potential leads to the Star Forge. At the same time, Malgus' shuttle arrived inside the hangar bay of the Venator. The bay doors were locked open while the Jedi were trying to get their troops inside the vessel before the retreat to gather reinforcements. Obviously, that didn't go as planned. When his shuttle landed in the hangar bay, there was a certain demeanor that changed within the halls of the Venator. Clones lined the halls and they aimed their weapons at the shuttle. The doors to the shuttle opened, and they opened fire at literally nothing. At the same time, Malgus' flagship docked with the ship. It was a decoy. Malgus roared into the hallway, cutting down any clones who happened to be by him. He marched down the hallways without saying a word. He directed his troopers in the different locations of the vessel to shut it down and take it over. The people in the hangar bay rerouted to find the Sith Lord and kill him. If they could at least do that, then there would be potential for a victory after all. Not a total victory, but at least one. Clones fled to the boarding hatch, but as they closed in, they were met with stiff resistance. Most of the clones were lucky, because most of them came across as Sith troopers, though the rest of them were in for a nightmare. The butcher crushed hallways and ripped apart clones. His swiftness with the blade was unimaginable to the clone eyes. When the Jedi came, it was a master-apprentice duo. They weren't on Coruscant when the order fell, but they survived just by being stationed here. If they weren't here, they likely would have been one of the casualties on the assault on Coruscant. The master told her apprentice to stay back. He did until she launched herself at the Sith Lord. He was an older apprentice, maybe a year removed from being a knight, so instinctively he followed his master in. The clones rounded the corner too. Their hope was to be able to attack the Sith. Malgus was quick with the blade, blocking their strikes and kicking her into the wall, before catching the apprentice with his hand and throwing him to the ground. Malgus could have already killed them, but where's the fun in that? His lightsaber fled his hands as it whipped itself down the hallways and cut through the clones. The two Jedi were at a loss for their brethren dropping to the ground. The master got up as she threw herself at the Sith Lord. He laughed, blocking her strike with absolute precision, before leaping over her and using the force to launch her to the wall. She dropped to the ground unconscious from the hit. Malgus was traveling alone, so both hallways surrounding him were filled with clones as he stood, towering over the student. He told the young man that he could live if he wanted. He got up and ignited his lightsaber, telling Malgus that he would never join the dark side. Malgus loved when Jedi did that little thing. That thing where they acted like they had a real chance of being able to resist. It was so adorable. Malgus slammed his blade against the students. He was waiting until the master woke up. At the same time, the clones rushed forward, and they couldn't shoot because they could harm their commander. They were coming in for hand-to-hand combat. As they got close, Malgus lifted his hand and they all stopped. The apprentice looked on in terror. 13 clones were stopped and placed on both sides, each of them clamoring for their necks as they all lost their ability to breathe. Malgus smiled at the student as he panicked, trying to save them. He raged forward and Malgus egged him on, telling the young Jedi to give into his anger, let it fuel him. Malgus blocked and parried every single strike with ease as he snapped the clones' necks. He could feel that the masters were awake, and she got to take witness of the deaths of their clones. Malgus turned to her with a grin under his mask. His piercing yellow eyes haunted her, and without even twisting his neck back to see his opponent, he drove his lightsaber through the student's chest. The master watched her student fall lifelessly on her as his blade dropped to the ground. Just like her student, anger rose from within and she leapt forward, attacking with all of her strength. He blasted a parry back and she ignited her student's lightsaber and attacked him with both, but it didn't even take that much for her to lose. Her first step caused her to lose all of her focus. When that was gone, she was cut across the chest and she dropped to the ground. A group of clones saw it and they opened fire, trying to get revenge for their Jedi General. Malgus didn't even give them the time of the day to turn around. He stopped their blaster shots with the Force and released them back at the clones, killing them all, as he kicked the Master's lifeless body off his lightsaber and stormed forward. On the ground, people were retreating into the forest. The city was ripped to shambles and the Sith were victorious. Sola, on the other hand, found something that she believed was interesting. Biss had actually found some relics pertaining to the Star Forge. While they weren't in constant communication, they were informed of Revan's message about the Star Forge, and they were told to look for anything they had about it. Truthfully, the Axis of 3 was mounting up their fleet so they could break out and give this information to the Republic High Command. They were far too worried about sending the information over wavelengths and having it intercepted. It didn't matter if the Sith knew what the Jedi were looking for. What did matter was the information the people at Biss had, which the Sith didn't even know the Jedi were looking to begin with. However, the people on Biss kept all that information inside the military facility, inside the command room. It was easy to find. They happened to forget about it once the battle began, and they paid the price for it. Luckily for Sola, she had 2 things she could deliver to Malgus. By the time he landed on the surface, he was in a pissy mood. Turns out the Venator he raided didn't have stable enough anything to survive, which meant that Malgus couldn't ship the vessel to Corellia and do the same trick there. Of course, there could be repairs done to it, but they probably wouldn't be able to get the ship through hyperspace to begin with. The way the engines were hit completely damaged the hyperdrive and the entire system was a ticking bomb. So even if they could install everything without killing themselves in the process, there wasn't even a guarantee it would hit its target. When Malgus found Sola, she explained that everything was going well. The planet had, for the most part, been captured. For the most part isn't what he wanted to hear, as he choked her, lifting her off her feet with the Force. He told her that he didn't want failure. She reached for her pockets frantically, trying to pull out the sphere. As she did, she found what she was looking for. The sphere dropped to the ground and rolled to his feet. He released his grip on her and she dropped, her feet hitting the ground and she falling to her knees. He asked what was on it, but she was busy coughing. He kicked her and told her to tell him now. His patience was thin. She heard a snap from within her side after he kicked her. She scrambled for the words and told him that it was a chain of planets on the far western side of the galaxy. They were Curia, Endor, and Bakura. He stood over her and asked if the Star Forge could be found at any of those locations. She said that it was unknown at the moment, but there was a chance she was cut off as he grabbed her by the back of the head and leaned down, telling her that she better go and find out. She was being removed from his army. He told her to link up with Revan's forces on Foma. He released his grip on her and stood up. An acolyte ran up to him and told him that Lord Exar was waiting a response from the battle and his progress. Malgus nearly cut the acolyte down before storming forwards towards a hologram. Sola, on the other hand, coughed up blood before looking over at the sphere. She reached for it, but that was a terrible idea. She could feel it the moment she tried to grab it, but decided against it because of the pain. She realized that she wasn't using the dark side to fuel her pain and the power. How odd. It was likely the shock from what she had just received. She grabbed the sphere and clawed her way to her feet and got to his ship. On his way to the briefing with Exar, Malgus was muttering to himself under his breath. He was sick of this guy. He was so terrible. And as proved by the success here on Biss, he was the legitimate. He stopped. He rounded the corner to see more than just Exar. Revan, Vitiate, Treya, and Vane were all situated on the hologram table. Malgus told them of his success, and then he was praised. He then told Revan that his second-in-command was coming his way. Revan asked for the trooper's name, and Malgus admitted he didn't know, and he didn't care. He just told Revan to be ready for her arrival. She was leaving as they spoke. Revan was taken aback by this, but he didn't have time to care. They were busy talking about the failures of the Mandalore campaign, and a couple of other failures across the front lines. Turns out Vitiate's children weren't as useful as he said they were, and Exar was fuming. Arkan, Thexan, and Valen went for an attack on a mid-rim world controlled by the Separatists. It was a terrible mistake because they barely came out alive, and Admiral Trench ripped their fleet apart. He strategically prepared for them, and they had nothing against him. It was a brutal failure. Exar admitted that he was fond of Malgus' success, and they began redirecting fleets to potential targets. Malgus told Revan that his former second-in-command would inform him more about Curia, Endor, and Bakura. Revan questioned what this meant, and Malgus cleared the air. He said he didn't want her. If Revan did, then more power to him. If not, she was disposable, just like all their second-tier Sith. Malgus didn't care for them, and Exar only forced him to be more brutal towards them. Instead of taking his anger out on Exar or the other Sith for not collectively turning against him, he took it out on his own troopers. The next second-in-command would likely face the same wrath from Malgus. Sola Grey, on the other hand, got inside of a vessel and set her coordinates for Foma. Once she was in hyperspace, she laid the sphere down on a small table and pulled out a medical capsule and turned on a small medical droid to help her with her ribs. She lifted her arm with her other arm as the droid sprayed some Bacta on her robes. She leaned down on the cot. While naturally, it would take over a month for this injury to heal, she didn't have that. While she was thinking of ways to fuel herself through the pain, she realized perhaps Malgus wasn't meant to be her teacher, though Revan already had a student. Maybe she'd find a Sith Lord somewhere. Her intentions weren't fully fleshed out. She just wanted to be regarded as more than just dirt. So maybe this was the way to do it. All she knew is that Malgus wasn't the Sith Lord for her. And that, my friends, is our episode. Again, special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir William 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo Weewoo 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, The Eternal Padawan, Malik, Johnny Nguyen, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Calic, Young Slayer 66, Mammoth Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Forder's Legacy Star Wars, Erebus, Rex the Wolf, The Man with 3 First Names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Smash that like button if you want early access to the Sith Clone Wars. Go check out the Patreon, you can get that early access right there along with some animations. Anyways, I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.